She stood in the gleaming quiet of Belmore Jewelers, fingertips hovering above the velvet tray of diamond studs she had dreamed of for months. Her heart thudded, not with fear, but with the weight of finally choosing herself. This wasn't just a purchase, it was defiance, after a lifetime of being overlooked, of being the easy child, the one who didn't cause trouble. She was here to mark a milestone no one else cared to celebrate. A raise earned through years of silent endurance, late nights, and tireless design work. For once, Eleanor wanted to honor her own worth. And then the door opened, and everything changed. Amber swept in like a storm disguised in silk and gloss, flanked by her entourage of curated friendships. Her voice, laced with mockery, sliced through the air before Eleanor even had time to turn around. The moment belonged to Eleanor, until her sister yanked it away, like she always did. Every insult disguised as a joke, every comparison masquerading as concern. It all unfolded again right there between the chandeliers and glass displays. But this time, Eleanor didn't shrink. She tried to stay composed. She tried to reason. She even tried to de-escalate when Amber accused her of stealing the spotlight from her recent engagement. An accusation so absurd it would have been laughable if it hadn't been shouted across a jewelry store. And then came the slap. A hot, stinging explosion across her cheek that stunned the entire store into silence. It wasn't just pain. It was betrayal. It was years of quiet tolerance boiling into one sharp, humiliating moment. And then, the voice, low, commanding, "Touch my wife again and see what happens." The stranger who stepped forward wore power like a second skin. Later, she'd learn his name was Gabriel Langford, founder of a tech empire, a billionaire who happened to mistake her for his wife. But in that moment, he was simply the first person who had ever stepped between her and Amber's cruelty. The moment he declared she didn't deserve to be humiliated, publicly or privately, something inside Eleanor shifted. Amber stuttered. Unsure for once in her life, she sputtered lies about a sisterly spat, attempting to manipulate the truth like she always had. But Gabriel wouldn't let it pass. Neither did Eleanor. Not this time. When the store owner escorted Amber out, Eleanor stood her ground. Her hands were shaking, her pulse roaring in her ears, but she didn't back down. She didn't rush after her sister to make peace. She didn't apologize for making a scene. She simply turned back to the counter, lifted her chin, and said, "I'll take the earrings." Gabriel offered her coffee after the ordeal. A strange gesture from a stranger, but not unwelcome. As they sipped lattes in a quiet cafe around the corner, Eleanor saw something unexpected in him. Understanding, he spoke of family dynamics, of resentment buried beneath privilege, of sibling comparisons that strangled growth. He saw her, not as someone to pity, but as someone who'd finally decided to stop being invisible. Then came the question that caught her breath. "What exactly do you do in design?" She answered cautiously, not expecting anything more than polite interest. But when he asked for her portfolio, her heart lurched. This wasn't just politeness. It was possibility. The email came the next morning, crisp and professional, yet carrying the weight of everything Eleanor had been too afraid to believe she deserved. Gabriel Langford had forwarded her portfolio to Inovia Tech's creative director, not as a favor, not out of pity, but because he believed she had something to offer. The interview was set for Friday at 2 p.m., an hour that stretched ahead like a thin line between the life she knew and the one she dared to imagine. Eleanor spent the next few days preparing like her future depended on it. Because it did. She refined her portfolio, tailored her resume, rehearsed responses not just to questions about design, but to doubts that whispered in the back of her mind. Old ghosts with voices that sounded too much like her mother's. "Be reasonable, Ellie. You've always been so independent." Translation: don't expect too much. But she was done being reasonable, done being silent, done pretending her accomplishments only mattered if someone else acknowledged them. The moment she stepped into Inovia Tech's headquarters, the contrast was immediate. Glass, greenery, light. None of the sterile pretense of offices she'd known before. It pulsed with innovation. Yes, but also something deeper. Intention. She was greeted by Jordan, a friendly assistant who offered her water and a smile. Her pulse hammered like a drumbeat in her ears as she waited, until she heard that voice again. Gabriel approached in dark jeans and a navy button-down, his smile calm but encouraging. "You're going to do great," he said. And somehow, she believed him. Then came Amy Sullivan, the creative director, sharp, brilliant, with fire in her eyes and no time for small talk. The interview wasn't a checklist. It was a conversation, a test of thought, philosophy, and poise. They talked design language, creative tension, collaboration under pressure, Gabriel mostly observed. But his presence anchored her, as if she'd been given silent permission to take up space. When Amy asked about handling difficult personalities, Eleanor didn't hesitate. I look for the shared objective beneath the ego, she said. Most conflict isn't about disagreement. It's about fear of not being heard. I make sure every voice is acknowledged, including my own. Amy smiled, and Eleanor felt the ground beneath her shift, ever so slightly, as if her story was no longer just about survival, but impact. Afterward, Gabriel offered her a tour. Unexpected, but she accepted. The rooftop garden was a marvel of living walls and open air, and when he asked gently about her family, she didn't flinch. They want me to apologize, she said, for being slapped. Gabriel's jaw tightened. Some families mistake silence for peace, but silence can become a kind of slow death. Eleanor nodded, the truth of his words cutting clean. I'm done dying quietly. When she got home that evening, her phone was a battlefield. Missed calls, angry texts, guilt-laced messages from her mother. Amber is devastated. Your behavior was uncalled for. The word slap never once appeared. She didn't respond. Instead, she opened her laptop, composed a thank you email to Amy, and attached her final portfolio revisions. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she owed anyone an explanation for choosing herself. Friday arrived like the edge of a knife. Sharp, final, and full of promise. Eleanor dressed with intention, not for beauty, not to impress, but for alignment. Black tailored pants, a deep green blouse that brought out the warmth in her eyes, and the earrings, those diamond studs that now felt less like a luxury and more like a declaration. She walked into the Inovia Tech building 5 minutes early, spine straight, nerves tightly bound beneath poise. The receptionist smiled. Jordan reappeared, all warmth and ease, offering her a seat and something to drink. She declined. Her throat was too tight for anything but breath. Amy greeted her again, this time with a firm nod and less formality. Follow me, she said. We've reviewed your work. There's just one more person who'd like to meet you. Claire Walsh. The name struck like a distant echo. Gabriel's wife, the woman she had been mistaken for, the woman whose presence, though entirely absent, had inadvertently cracked open a new chapter of Eleanor's life. Claire entered the conference room with grace and gravitas, her presence commanding without effort. Her features were strikingly similar to Eleanor's, enough to explain the confusion. Same build, similar hair, but Claire's energy was grounded, precise. I had to see the woman who stirred up such a storm at Belmore's, she said with a light chuckle, then extended her hand. It's a pleasure. Eleanor. They spoke not as interviewer and candidate, but as two women who understood the bruises no one saw. Claire asked about her creative principles, her leadership instincts, her vision. Eleanor answered without deflection. Without doubt, every word was clear, deliberate, hard-earned. When it ended, it wasn't with a verdict, but a promise. You'll hear from us by Monday, Claire said, regardless of the outcome. Thank you for being unapologetically yourself. It's rare and needed. As Eleanor walked back to her car, she didn't feel the crushing dread of uncertainty. She felt peace, the kind that grows when you stop negotiating your worth. Her phone buzzed that night. Dinner on Sunday. 5 p.m. Dress nice. No drama. That was her mother, always issuing orders in the form of invitations. She responded without overthinking. I'll be there at 5:15. I have errands. Small defiance. Loud message. When Sunday came, she dressed simply, neatly, and wore the earrings, not to provoke, but to remind herself of who she had become. At the door, her father greeted her with a look that hovered somewhere between disappointment and concern. She greeted him back with calm civility. Amber was already there, perched on the edge of the sofa, scrolling like nothing had happened. But the second Eleanor entered, her gaze sharpened, the same tired tension flickering behind her eyes. Look who finally showed up, Amber muttered. Eleanor walked past without responding. Into the kitchen, where her mother was already arranging salad greens with the precision of someone avoiding conflict. Jessica, can you set the table? Her mother asked. Tone clipped. Actually, Eleanor said gently, I think we need to talk first. Her mother froze. Let's not ruin dinner. Eleanor tilted her head. Talking about the truth isn't ruining anything. Pretending it didn't happen, that's what ruins things. Amber appeared in the doorway, eyes narrowing. Are you still going on about that slap? Eleanor turned, voice unwavering. Yes, because no one has acknowledged it. The air snapped taut. Her father stepped in. Girls, please. I'm calm, Eleanor interrupted. I'm stating facts. Amber slapped me. A store owner asked her to leave, and a stranger had to step in because my own family won't hold her accountable. It was a misunderstanding, her mother whispered. You were making a scene. No, Eleanor said. She hit me because I wouldn't let her humiliate me again, and I'm not letting this be swept under the rug. Not this time, Amber scoffed. You're acting like I committed a crime. You did something violent, Eleanor said. And no one in this house seems to care. That says everything. The kitchen went still. No one met her gaze. Her mother stirred the salad again. Her father shifted his weight, and Amber looked away. Dinner was a quiet performance of forced civility, the air heavy with what had been said and what still trembled beneath the surface. Eleanor sat straighter than usual, a kind of armor in her posture, her eyes calm but scanning. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and when she did, her tone carried no apology. The table had a fifth-place setting. Are we expecting someone? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Trevor is joining us, Amber replied, her tone full of calculated sweetness. My fiancé deserves to be part of family dinners now, don't you think? It was a power play, a reminder of status. Eleanor didn't flinch. Of course, she said evenly. Trevor arrived minutes later, dressed in business casual charm, polite and composed. He greeted everyone with warmth, his smile widening when he saw Eleanor. Congrats on your promotion, he said sincerely. Amber mentioned you work in graphic design. Eleanor blinked. Amber had mentioned her. Yes, she said, her voice steady but surprised. I specialize in digital media integration. She said you're really talented, Trevor added, taking his seat beside Amber. Across the table, Amber was suddenly very interested in her wine glass. The meal passed in fragmented conversation. Property listings from Trevor, complaints from her mother about boutique inventory, and a muted debate between her father and Amber about wedding venues. Eleanor listened, answered when addressed, and kept one hand gently resting near her earrings, a silent anchor. Trevor noticed them midway through dessert. Those are beautiful, he said, nodding toward the diamonds. You picked those up at Belmore's. Right, Amber told me. The tension crackled. Amber stiffened. Eleanor studied her, watching how discomfort bloomed in her expression. Yes, she replied, meeting Trevor's eyes. It was quite an eventful visit. Trevor hesitated. She told me something happened, but not the details. Eleanor offered a slight smile. Let's just say it was a turning point. There was a pause, heavy and uncertain. And then Amber, surprising everyone, said softly, I made a scene. It got out of hand. I shouldn't have done that. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was the first time Amber had ever admitted fault in front of their parents. Eleanor nodded. Thank you. And the earrings, they look nice on you, Amber added awkwardly. For a moment, it felt like a ceasefire. Not resolution, not forgiveness, but maybe the first stone laid on a path out of the wreckage. Later, as the family dispersed into separate corners of the house, Amber found her in the kitchen, rinsing a dish. Did you really meet Gabriel Langford? She asked under her breath. I did, Eleanor replied, not looking up. He mistook you for his wife. Eleanor turned, her face unreadable. Yes, but more importantly, he didn't let you get away with hitting me. Amber winced. Trevor was mad about that too. Said it was abusive, because it was. Amber bit her lip. I didn't expect you to fight back. You've never had to expect that before, Eleanor said gently. But I won't go back to who I was. Amber gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. As Eleanor drove home, the silence in the car felt different, lighter. There were no grand reconciliations, no tears, but there had been truth, and sometimes that was enough. Her phone pinged as she parked outside her building. Unknown number. Eleanor. It's Gabriel. Amy was impressed. Before we make a formal offer, Claire would love to meet you for lunch Tuesday. Let me know if you're available. She stared at the message, heart thudding, not from nerves, but from something like awe, not because of who sent it, but because of who she'd become since the day they met. Tuesday arrived bathed in early autumn sunlight, the kind that made the city shimmer just a little more brightly. Eleanor chose a simple dress, midnight blue, structured, elegant, and pulled her hair into a low twist. The diamonds sat on her earlobes like a quiet rebellion, sparkling reminders of the moment she stopped asking permission to exist. The restaurant Gabriel had reserved was tucked into a quiet street of glass storefronts and ivy-covered walls. It exuded quiet wealth, not opulence, but precision. She arrived 5 minutes early and was led to a private terrace, where Claire Walsh stood waiting with a glass of water and the kind of poise that can't be learned, only honed. Eleanor, Claire said warmly, thank you for coming. They sat across from one another beneath a canopy of leaves, a breeze tugging softly at the linen napkins. The waiter took their orders and disappeared with practiced silence. For a moment, they simply observed each other. I saw your campaign for Sunrise Healthcare, Claire began. It was bold. Not afraid to take risks. That's rare. Eleanor smiled. The client almost pulled the plug after the first round, but we showed them the strategy behind the risk. They stayed, and the engagement numbers tripled. Claire nodded approvingly. And your ability to articulate the why behind your choices. That's what Gabriel noticed. They talked easily about design, ethics in branding, the future of user experience. But eventually, Claire leaned forward, her tone shifting from professional to personal. Gabriel told me what happened at the jewelry store. With your sister. Eleanor stiffened, just slightly. Claire continued. I have a brother, older, brilliant, terrifying. Our family celebrated his ambition and measured me against his shadow. There was no judgment in her voice, only recognition. I spent years trying to make them proud on his terms, Claire said, until I realized pride given conditionally is not worth earning. Eleanor exhaled, slow and deliberate. Sometimes I wonder if I stayed quiet so long that they forgot how to hear me. Claire looked at her with a kind of sisterhood forged not by blood, but by fire. But you spoke anyway. That's what matters. After lunch, as they walked out into the golden light, Claire paused at the steps. You'll have our formal offer by end of day, she said. Senior creative strategist, full benefits, stock options. You'll report directly to Amy, but Gabriel and I will keep an eye on your growth. Eleanor nodded, the moment landing with full weight. Thank you. For believing in me? We don't believe, Claire said with a smile. We observe, and we reward what's earned. That evening, as the sun dipped below the city skyline, Eleanor sat by her window in the new apartment she'd only recently dared to lease. The velvet box was open beside her, and the diamonds glinted like tiny defiant stars. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Amber. Mom's birthday dinner next Saturday, 6 p.m. Trevor and I have news. Hope you can come, followed by a second message. And maybe wear the earrings. Mom said she actually likes them. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't even closure. But it was a crack in the wall. A sign that the fortress of resentment might be softening. Friday arrived, and so did the offer letter. The numbers were beyond anything she'd dreamed of. Almost double her old salary, with a flexible remote option, a creative budget, and a generous development stipend. She signed it with trembling fingers, then sent it back with a single sentence. I accept, and I won't let you down. That weekend, she walked the sculpture garden with Claire, something of a new ritual. They spoke of projects and boundaries, of families and old wounds, and how sometimes the greatest act of vengeance isn't revenge, but self-ownership. You look lighter, Claire said. I feel full, Eleanor replied. Like I finally stopped bleeding in places no one saw. Claire smiled. That's what happens when you stop shrinking. Saturday came. The birthday dinner loomed. But Eleanor didn't dread it. She dressed simply again. Jeans, a dark green sweater, the earrings, and walked into her parents' house with a quiet kind of power. Her mother met her with cautious warmth. Her father asked about the new job with real interest. Even Amber, beneath the sarcasm, offered a tight hug. Trevor and I are expecting, she announced halfway through dinner. Beaming, the table erupted with congratulations, and Eleanor clapped. Sincerely, not out of obligation, but because joy no longer threatened her identity. Later, in the kitchen, Amber stood beside her drying dishes. I was afraid you'd upstage me again, she admitted. But you didn't. I wasn't trying to, Eleanor replied gently. You just always thought the spotlight was yours alone. Amber didn't answer, but she handed Eleanor a towel, a peace offering in cotton. As she drove home, her phone pinged one last time. From Gabriel. Heard the offer's been signed. Welcome aboard, Eleanor. Let's build something remarkable. She smiled into the darkness, her reflection flickering in the window, the earrings catching one last glint of light. The slap hadn't broken her. It had freed her. And in the end, it wasn't the pain that defined her, but the woman who stood up, looked her past in the eye, and chose to rise anyway. Thank you for listening to this journey of vengeance transformed into self-worth. If Eleanor's story moved you, subscribe to Vengeance Within and share with someone who needs to hear that their pain doesn't define their future. You are more than what they said, more than what they did. You are becoming